Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. I rise today in opposition, again, to Senate Bill 63. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. Words from the new Colossus inscribed at the base of the Statue of Liberty, who was symbolically blindfolded because justice is blind, unbiased, and should not be based upon a person's appearance nor other outside influences. She holds scales representing the weighing of evidence on its own merit. There is also a snake at her feet representing evil. Today, juxtaposes the justice system we have versus the one we promised. Exacerbating issues for the poor is not biblical, civil, nor is it humane. Proverbs 14:31 says, "He who oppresses the poor shows utter contempt for his maker, but whoever is kind honors God." Today's stance on SB 63 will record our individual stances and our stance as a state with regard to our poor citizens. I'll leave you with this. When we think of what is most expensive to become and be in Georgia, we may think a lawyer, we may think a doctor, or even a legislator with the sacrifices that each of us make. You're wrong. The most expensive thing you can be in Georgia is poor. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the well.
Thank you, Representative. The lady has yielded back the well. Representative Kennard, recognized for up to 2 minutes. Representative Kennard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I oppose SB 63. There are a significant number of Georgians sitting in our county jails and state prisons right now for one reason. They have no money. They are poor. Most of the folks behind bars in Georgia are poor and were convicted for low-level nonviolent offenses. When you're poor, you cannot afford your own representation. Your only option is a public defender. There are some good public defenders. We just don't have enough, and too many poor men and women fall through the cracks and inevitably get hammered by our criminal system. With proper representation, there are a lot of poor incarcerated Georgians who would not have been convicted at all, and most of the rest would not have received as harsh of a sentence. Money and the lack thereof biases our justice outcomes. I know this because of my professional experience working with the homeless. In the program I oversee, a typical client has a mental health diagnosis, a subsequent substance use disorder, and a felony background. Oh, and one more thing, they're homeless, so they're poor. It's telling how much intersection these conditions have: mental illness, substance use, poverty, and a criminal record. Where I have to spend a lot of my time as the director is leveraging my position as a state representative to pull our clients up out of the criminal justice quicksand. I'm in court almost weekly advocating for someone to come to our program in lieu of incarceration because their convictions were directly related to mental health, substance, and poverty. I'm constantly contacting probation offices from all over Georgia because of bench warrants issued for a failure to appear. I'm explaining that why they failed to appear is because they were homeless. They had no stable address to receive the notice of their court date. These folks are often faced with hefty monetary fines, so I negotiate working community service hours instead of the fine that's impossible for them to pay. The good news is my efforts work. Judges accept my recommendations for program placement, warrants are quashed, and court dates reset, and community service hours are accepted. This is one of the superpowers that I have possessed as a state rep that I've really enjoyed. I've helped a lot of people get untangled from this system during my 3 terms. But if the poor do not have an advocate with some pull to stand up for them, they will be crushed by this state's criminal system. SB 63 continues this crushing. SB 63 picks on the poor. Please vote no. Thank you.
Gentleman shielded the well. Representative Derrick Jackson is recognized for up to 2 minutes to speak to the report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I rise to oppose Senate Bill 63. While I was reading this 17-page bill, I kept asking the question, what is it that Senate Bill 63 is trying to fix? But then it was crystallized when the sponsor was asked what would happen when individuals are forced to remain in custody pending trial because they are too poor to afford a bond. The sponsor said, I quote, community groups could put money together. That's interesting because there's an irony here because the text of this bill says it would be criminalized. I invite you to go to section 4, line number 192. No more than 3 cash bonds may be posted per year by any individual, corporation, organization, charity, nonprofit corporation, or group in any jurisdiction. That sounds like to me that we can possibly criminalize churches who will raise money to get their member out of jail. On line number 194, every individual, corporation, organization, charity, nonprofit corporation, and here's the other key point, colleagues, listen clearly. Any person or entity who violates any part of this paragraph will be guilty of a misdemeanor. This bill will force judges to set bail even in cases where defendants would have been released. Some of us in here have been released. Elected officials, off-duty law enforcement, lawyers, military veterans, because they realize a day in jail could cost them their job. With that, I yield the well.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Representative Miller, you have up to 7 minutes.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I rise today again to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 63, a bill that, if enacted, would undermine the historic bipartisan criminal justice reform efforts led by former Governor Nathan Deal and place in jeopardy Georgia's role as a national leader in evidence-based criminal justice reform measures that both help reduce the burgeoning cost of our criminal justice system and make our neighborhoods safer. It serves as a reminder that between 2011 and 2018, together, Republicans and Democrats implemented an array of criminal justice measures, including accountability courts, and yes, cash bail reforms. We already did this, y'all. These reforms were designed to contribute to public safety by helping people turn their lives around and not recidivate, so that they can become contributing members to their communities and not simply more experienced criminals. In 2018, led by Governor Deal, the Georgia legislature unanimously passed reforms that trusted judges to release people accused of misdemeanor and other low-level offenses without posting cash bond, if it's appropriate. When someone in his own party told Governor Deal that this was not a, quote, Republican issue, he said, perhaps it's not, but it's the right thing to do, and he was right. Today, it is my hope that this chamber will also do the right thing and reject Senate Bill 63. Now, the Council on Criminal Justice Reform from 2017 to 2018, led by Chief Justice Boggs, reviewed the issues surrounding pretrial justice in Georgia. With these goals in mind, maximize public safety, minimize pretrial appearances, and maximize personal liberties. I submit to you that these 3 standards sought to guide us in our actions, and they should guide us in our actions today as well. The council conducted an extensive analysis of the issue of pretrial detention and cash bail, including a legal review of legislative reforms pending litigation around the country, as well as a review of current practices in Georgia. Available articles, case law and research. They heard from a wide range of groups, including the Southern Center for Human Rights, the Georgia Association of Professional Bondsmen, Georgia Municipal Association, and the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police. They did their homework, and before we cast their work aside, we should be poised to do ours as well. Just 5 short years ago, this committee was diligent and thorough in their work, noting that when it comes to meaningful criminal justice reform, the issues of pretrial justice are of paramount importance. For good reason. Pretrial detention is expensive, it can be ineffective, and it can exacerbate Georgia's 2-tier criminal justice system. Let's talk about the research and the data. First, from a public safety perspective, pretrial incarceration does not make us safer. This is the data. In fact, the more time an accused person, by the way, not a convicted person, an accused person who has the presumption of innocence, the more time that they spend in pretrial detention, the more likely they are to reoffend. Research shows that spending more than 7 days in pretrial detention increases the probability of a new arrest, and a new arrest for a violent crime. One Kentucky study evaluating 150,000 defendants found that people held in jail for just 2 to 3 days after arrest were 39% more likely to be arrested on a new charge while the first charge was pending. 2 to 3 days. And that's in our criminal justice report. That is what informed our criminal justice reform in 2018. Second, the findings based on a year of study, of evidence and data, requiring cash bail before an initial court proceeding, which this bill does, can result in extended detention for those who simply can't afford it. We've talked about the criminalization of poverty. This bill would require incarceration for many offenses that once the person is fully vetted through due process, if they are convicted, they would not even receive incarceration for. We're asked to do this based on what? There is no evidence that expanding the application of past bail and substituting the judgment of lawmakers without informed evidence, without a thorough vetting, will make us safer. My colleagues, I could talk longer. I thank the Speaker for allowing me this time. I ask if you oppose Senate Bill 63 and work with us together to, in a bipartisan fashion, formulate evidence-based measures and procedures that will make us all safer. And lastly, what is most scary about this bill is the criminalization of churches and religious institutions that have historically been on the front lines of social justice and civil rights justice for Black and brown people in this country. I do not believe that it is appropriate today or any day to tell parishioners and people of faith who pool their money together, who want to bail mothers out on Mother's Day, who want to bail fathers out on Father's Day, who want to bail children out on Christmas Eve, that this body believes that they should be charged as criminals unless they go through the process of becoming bail bondsmen. And if I were you, I would carefully look at that subsection, because who is not included in that are bail bondsmen. Excluded from that are bail bondsmen. Reread it. Why wouldn't a bail bondsman also not be allowed to bail out more than 3 people? If you look at the language, that's what we do as legislators. Perhaps this is a result of the hasty, private, not public committee conference procedure that yielded that bail fund provision. I submit to you, send back Senate Bill 63. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My time is up. I yield the well.
The lady has yielded the well. We've had representatives explain this from both the pro and the con side of the issue. On the adoption of the conference report on SB 63, all those in favor of the adoption of the conference committee report will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? All members voted. If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the adoption of the conference committee report, SB 63, the yeas are 95, the nays are 67, and the committee of conference report